In this video, we are going to go over the assembly of the Estes Green Egg Model Rocket Kit. Before you build, make sure you have a pair of scissors, a ruler, a pencil, and a bottle of tacky glue. Your kit will come in a bag like this. And when you're ready to build, each group gets one bag, and have them open it up and take out the contents. In each kit, you should have a set of fins, a rocket body tube, a payload section tube, a nose cone and payload section. Now these have to be cut with a razor blade, and we will pre-cut these. Also in your kit is a motor mount tube, a smaller bag with some smaller components, and a tube for assembling your motor mount stopper. Also in your kit is a small straw for the launch mount, and a set of instructions. Now make sure to hold on to the instructions because there are a few parts you need to cut out and include in your rocket. So in this assembly video, you're going to go in a slightly different order than the instructions so that you have more time for your glue to dry. So let's start out at the assembly of the motor mount. You're going to open up the small bag in your kit. And in that small bag, you're going to have these retainer rings for your motor mount, your parachute, which you can put to the side for now, your shock cord, which can be put to the side for now, a metal clip, and a green motor retaining ring. Your first step is to remove the two laser cut cardboard rings. And after you remove the cardboard rings, these are your components. And we have to start by marking a few spots on our motor mount tube. In the instructions, it shows there are 3 lines you should mark on your motor mount tube. There's one 1/2 inch from the end, there's one 1 inch from the end, and there's one 2 1/4 inches from the end. So we're going to put a mark at 1/2 inch, we're going to put a mark at 1 inch, and we're going to put a mark at 2 1/4 inches. Now at 2 1/4 inches, you're supposed to cut a small notch with an X-Acto knife. We are going to prepare that for you before you receive your kit. The next step is to take the metal clip, which has a 90-degree bend on one end, and we're going to insert that 90-degree bend into the notch at 2 1/4 inches. Next, we are going to add some glue about halfway down the length of the tube. And we're going to take the black retaining ring and slide it over the metal clip and over the glue up to that 1 inch mark. You may smear any excess glue. And now you're going to add the 2 retainer rings. There is one, it just has a circular cutout, and there is one which has a notch cut into it. The ring with the circular cutout goes over the front open end of the tube. And you may need to wiggle this and force it a little bit. It's going to be a very tight fit. So once you have your ring with the circular opening over the front end of the tube, you're going to add some glue around the front and the rear edges. And make sure to add a good amount of glue because this has to withstand the forces of your rocket's thrust. So we got the back edge. And we've got the front edge. And now we're going to do the same with the back ring. We're going to line it up so that the metal clip fits in the notch. And then we're going to get it over the tube. We're going to slide it up to that 1/2 inch mark. And like we did with the other ring, we're going to add glue in the joints between the rear end and the front end. Alright, so now we are almost done with our motor mount assembly. We have our metal clips sticking out the back. We have our 2 retainer rings attached. And now we have the green engine stopper ring. Our engine stopper ring is going to stop the engine from flying through the motor mount housing and into the fuselage of your rocket. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some glue on the inside edge of the front end of the motor mount. That is the open side, which does not have the clip at the back. Once we add some glue, we're going to push the engine stopper ring in until it hits that right angle end of the metal clip. If you want to add some strength to the engine stopper, you may add a little bit of glue around the front edge. Just make sure that you can see through it and it's unobstructed, because the ejection charge is going to fire through this hole in the front of the motor mount. And so that is the end of our motor mount. We have our 2 retainer rings glued in place. We have our metal clip running the length of it with the end sticking out the back. And we have our motor stopper ring glued into the front. You can now put the motor mount aside and allow the glue to dry. Alright, next we are going to install our shock cord. So in your instructions, you're going to see a shock cord mount. Cut out the entire shock cord mount. Alright, once you cut out your shock cord mount, you're going to take the shock cord, which is a bungee. You're going to place a dab of glue on the number 2. You're going to stick your shock cord in the glue going over the number 1. And then you're going to take the number 3, fold it over, and squish it into the glue. Then you're going to put another dab of glue on top of the shock cord. Take the upper half of it, fold it over, and squish it down. And now your shock cord end should be sandwiched between the folded paper and glued together. Make sure you squish it flat and wipe away any excess glue. After your shock cord mount is glued in place, you're going to take your rocket body tube, and it's important to know what is the front side and what is the rear side of your rocket body tube. The side with slots cut out of it, these slots are cut out for the fins. So this is the rear side of the tube. This is the front side of the tube. So we want to glue your shock cord into the inside surface in the front side of your tube. What you're going to do is take your shock cord mount, put a drop of glue on it, a generous drop of glue, and then you're going to insert it about a finger length into the front end of the rocket body and push it against the side so that it adheres. Once you get the shock cord to adhere to the side of the tube, you can leave it inside to dry. The purpose of the shock cord is to keep the rocket section attached to the payload section after launch. Next, we are going to install the motor mount and the fins. So you're going to take your motor mount, and remember the end with the clip hanging off is the back side. And we're going to insert it into the rear side of your rocket body, the side with the fin slots, with the front side in first. Now you may find that your rocket tube may be a little warped, may not be perfectly round, so if your motor mount doesn't fit in right away, just wiggle it around a little bit until it inserts. Now we need to get the motor mount in the right distance. You will see in the fin slot, if you push it in too far, you'll be able to see the rear retainer ring. If you don't push it in far enough, you will see the front retainer ring. So you want to insert it so that you have no obstructions in any of the 3 fin slots. Now once your engine mount is inserted the proper distance so that there's no obstructions in the fin slots, you are ready to install the fins. The fins are in laser cut balsa wood. These are the 3 fins, so we must carefully remove them and set the rest of the balsa wood aside. If you break one of your fins, no worries, just glue or tape it back together. Right, so now that we have our 3 fins, we can one by one insert them into the slots in the rocket body. Now the slots in the rocket body are slightly skinnier than the fins, so we'll have a nice snug fit. Insert one corner first and then sort of wiggle it around. Wiggle it, slide it back and forth, jiggle it until your fin inserts fully into the slot like so. And you're going to repeat that with all 3 fins. You will notice that some fins may go in more easily than others. Don't worry about it, just wiggle them around and make sure that they're into the slot as far as they will go. Now ideally you want the fins swept back. If any students put them swept forward, they will still function. Now that we have our 3 fins inserted, we want to wiggle them so that they're all sticking out of the rocket body at a nice angle perpendicular to the fuselage. Once the rocket fins are evenly spaced, add a line of glue along the side of the base of each fin. And this will give your fins structural integrity as the rocket flies through the air, and also when the fins impact the ground. We are almost done with our gluing. There's one more step. We have to add the straw, which will mount our rocket onto the launch rod. You can glue this anywhere about midway up the rocket body, but you want to make sure that it's in between two fins. If it's parallel with one of the fins, the fin is going to be in the way. And we will put some glue running vertically up the rocket body. Then we're going to stick our straw into the glue. Now once you have your motor mount installed, your fins attached, and your launch mount straw attached, and the shock cord glued inside, we are done with all the steps that require glue. So at this time you may put your rocket body aside to dry. And now we're going to assemble the payload section of our rocket. You should have your green payload section tube, your nose cone, and the aft plug of your payload section. Now the aft plug has a hook for the parachute, so that's going to be the bottom. The open end is going to be the top. So the aft end slips into your payload section tube, as does the nose cone. This is what the entire assembly looks like, and your egg is going to sit inside the green payload section. The rear is going to attach to the rocket body and will be attached to the shock cord and parachute through the hook. Now, as your rocket is flying, you want to make sure your egg remains inside the payload section. Now, as it comes, the nose and the aft section slip off pretty easily. We want to make them nice and snug. So to do that, you're going to use some tape. Now, both clear tape and masking tape work for this. So you're going to add some tape around the outside edge of your nose cone. See how that affects the fit. And you should notice the more tape you add, the more snug it gets. You want it to be nice and snug so that it will not separate in flight, but you want it loose enough that you can easily pull it apart by hand. That's pretty good. Now on the aft section, you're going to do the same. Make sure your students only add tape onto the front end. You want the front end to be snugly attached to the payload section. However, the rear end, you want to smoothly separate from the rocket body. This is how your parachute is going to deploy. Now, I had several students tape up the rear end of it, so there was too snug of a fit between the payload section and the rocket. And so when the ejection charge fired, the rocket did not separate and the parachute did not deploy. So you want to make sure that it can separate easily from the rocket section, but that it's snugly attached to the payload section. So there we go, our completed payload section. Now, as the glue on our rocket is drying, we're going to start to attach the rocket section to the payload section, and we're going to install the parachute. To install your parachute, first carefully remove it from the plastic wrapper. And what you want to do is pull on these 3 bundles of cords, and we're going to want to join them together at the end. bring them together into a tip, and we're going to feed them through the hook at the end of your payload section and pull them through. Once you do that, you want to find the 3 loops. And once you have your 3 loops, you're going to open them up, and you're going to take your parachute. You're going to pass the parachute through the 3 loops and pull the string tight. And now your parachute is attached to the payload section. So once your parachute is attached, you can fold it back up and you can carefully wrap the string around it. Next, we're going to attach the shock cord. So we're going to take our rocket section, which is still drying, and we're going to put it aside nearby so that we can reach the payload section with the end of the shock cord. Now we're going to take the shock cord, we are going to feed it through. We're going to tie a knot, and since this has to withstand a lot of force, I recommend tying a double knot. And there you have it. Alright, once you are ready to load your rocket for launch, you're going to take some pieces of recovery wadding, which is a sort of flame-proof paper, and you're going to insert 2 or 3 pieces into the front of the rocket body. And this is to protect your parachute from the ejection charge so that it doesn't melt. If your parachute melts, it won't open in flight. After that, you can start to stuff your shock cord into the front of the rocket body. And you can also, after it's folded up, you can also insert your parachute. And make sure that all of that string and elastic is tucked out of the way so that your payload section is able to separate, like so. And once your students are ready to launch, you may have them insert their cotton balls and their egg into the payload section. After your rocket assembly is complete, it's time to load the rocket motor. Our rocket engine has 2 ends. The rear end has a rocket nozzle, which looks like this. The front end is open, and the open end is where the ejection charge fires. So you can go around the room to each of the completed rockets and insert the engine so that the rear side with the engine nozzle is facing out. Make sure the open end is the end you're sticking into the tube. So you're going to have to bend the metal clip slightly. And when you insert the engine all the way, you're going to feel it stop when it reaches the stopper, and the metal clip will lock in place. This holds your rocket engine inside the mount. To remove the engine, you bend the clip out of the way and pull. Now once you get outside to launch, you have to insert the igniter. Take the igniter and insert it into the engine nozzle, and make sure the black tip is in contact with the propellant inside. You should feel it stop and hit the end. Once it's inserted, bend it away from the launch pad so that the 2 metal leads are sticking out. And you're going to take the plastic plug and insert it into the engine nozzle. This will hold your igniter in place. So once your igniter is in place, I recommend taking the 2 leads and bending them outward like this. And then we are ready to install it on the launch pad. Once the rocket is on the launch pad, make sure You are holding the launch key so a student can't launch the rocket as you're working near it. And once the rocket's on the launch pad, make sure that the igniter leads are not touching the metal base of the launch pad. And then carefully take one black clip and clip it on one of the leads. And take the red clip and clip it on another one of the leads. Now, these are a little bit tricky to put on. Just make sure that the clip has contact with the lead, and make sure the two clips and the two leads are not contacting each other to create a short circuit. Once you have your igniters hooked up to the launch controller, you should have your launch controller a safe distance away from the rocket. You should have it so the cables are laid out along the grass and are almost fully stretched out, but you should have no tension on the cables. Now, I suggest having the launch controller on the ground. I recommend not having students hold it, because if they pull on it, you could pull your igniter clips off of the rocket. And when you get to the launch controller, you have the launch key. And the launch key enables the launch controller, but it also checks for connectivity of your launch leads and your igniter. In order for your rocket to launch, you must have a complete circuit. So when you insert the key, if it doesn't light up, it means there is an electrical short on the launch pad. If you insert the key and get no light, go back to the rocket and check all of the connections. If everything is connected properly, then when you insert the key, you will get an indicator LED. This means that everything is connected properly. Once everything is connected properly, leave the key inserted and you can have your student launch the rocket. To launch the rocket, there are two buttons. First, they must push and hold down the arm button. It will sound a siren. Once they're holding that down, you can count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when they get to 0, they should hold down the yellow button and the red button at the same time until the rocket ignites. If they hold down both buttons for over 5 seconds, have them let go, remove the launch key, and go check your connections on the rocket. And just a reminder, never leave the launch key inserted while you are going near the launch pad.